So, this right here.
Yes, I recognize that.
This, I am the son of a 1960s flower child, incredible taste in music mother.
Great.
And
thank you for not saying grandmother.
My mom went to SUNY Plattsburgh, late 60s, early 70s, and this was the exact record she bought in 1970 when she was in college. And I was lucky enough to inherit her collection. As a kid, her favorite band, or as a kid growing up myself, her favorite band was Blood, Sweat, and Tears. Oh, wow. So I had a lot of this playing in the house when I was a youngster, which is kind of what led me into music journalism later on. But just to preface with all that, what's the first thing that comes to mind when you see this record?
The first thing that comes to mind is that it was done by the Quay brothers. The actual sketch without the heads were done by the Quay brothers from England. They're animators. They're twins, and this is without the heads and the lettering. The picture itself was in the Museum of Modern Art because the Quay brothers are very they're very famous in art circles. They're wonderful, and I didn't know that until a couple of years ago that it was actually in the Museum of Modern Art collection.
Does this bring back any memories, seeing this cover? I mean, I don't know how often you see the records themselves.
Well, no, I mean, I see it all the time, and I hear the music all the time. Every time I'm in a grocery or an elevator, I hear something.
What do you remember from those recording sessions? I mean, this is a pretty landmark album.
This album, or the first album, The Child is Father to the Man, was more fun. The recording sessions were fun because we were just like crazy and stoned and having a good time. And it only took 2 weeks. You know, this is a more thought out kind of thing. But then again, we had a producer who was very serious, Jimmy Garcia.
Well, with that record, you guys were an intersection of jazz and rock and roll on a whole other level. I don't know of many bands before you guys that were doing that, full horn sections with rock and roll. Was that always something that was out of the gate that you wanted to do, or is that just how the cards fell with that kind of intersection?
I think it was, I know Al Cooper wanted to, when we were in the Blues Project together, he wanted to add horns to the band. And Danny Cal, it was Danny's band. Yeah. And Danny was totally against it. And I mean, I didn't care, you know. I was too busy trying to get laid to really wonder whether I wanted horns in the band. And when Al left, and then I left, and we talked about that concept of having a band with horns. And at the same time, there was an album out that influenced both of us. It was the Buckingham's Time and Charges album. And they used the horn section. And the charts were, and they actually was the Chicago Symphony horn section. And the charts were very R&B like, and it was just so interesting. And we felt we wanted to have a horn section like that we could take on the road. And so that was our goal.
Well, it's interesting with the fact that not only was this a #1 album, it won Album of the Year.
It won the Grammy for album. Yeah, we beat out Abbey Road for some reason.
Well, what's crazy about that is
there's a lot of things that are crazy about that.
Well, it's definitely deserving of the award, but I was trying to think what your thoughts are today, where rock, let alone a rock band with a horn section, are barely, if ever, nominated for Album of the Year, let alone ever win it. What do you think about that? The idea that a band like this had that kind of swagger back in the day, but
there's not too many bands with actual live musicians that are that are winning awards and stuff like that.
Yeah,
but you know, I mean, that was my day, and I'm not really involved in the music business or the music today. You know, it's really.
But it's around you at some point. I mean,
It is, but you know, when I choose what I want to listen to, and then I usually choose jazz or classical.
Yeah.
Music. There are some things that I really, really like. I'll go back to, but I don't go back to listening to rock too much anymore. There are some things on the radio that I really, really like. For instance, the new folk people. You know, I'll put on the Pandora station, and that's great. There are some modern things that I really like, but unfortunately, if I hear them on the radio, they don't say who it is. So
of course,
and I can't like take a key phrase and go home and Google it, and I've done that.
Yeah.
And it's so frustrating, so I just figure the hell with it.
Well, and you were down, at least as far as I've read, you were down in the city around the folk revival of the late 50s, early 60s?
Yeah. I'll be talking about that tonight, and the book is, that's a lot of the book is about how my career started and the influence.
Well, what's interesting is when you look at least the press release I had seen, or the info on the book, compared to what I've also read about your career, it feels like you've had this kind of Forrest Gump thing where you're always at the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's
an actual quote from Al Anderson.
Oh, really?
From NRBQ.
Yeah.
I signed them for NRBQ at Yankee Stadium when I was at Mercury. And actually, I had Al play on a Christmas Guitars album, but somebody asked him about me, and he said, "Oh, that's the guy that was always at the right place at the right time." I thought that was very funny.
What do you think about that? That you were at all these different junctions of history and not only witnessed, but were personally involved in a lot of these.
It was just amazing when I look back on it. That's what made me really want to write a book, and the fact that I spoke to people on the phone like Martin Luther King or Tennessee Williams and
Were you aware of that at the time, of how crazy that was?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was crazy. How could you not be aware?
Yeah.
Even recently, like 8 years ago, we had dinner with Sandy Koufax. And,
oh my God.
It was a total surprise, and it was like a party in Tortola.
You a big baseball guy?
Well, yeah.
Well, I was going to say, that was the king of the kings back in the day.
I didn't know that he was going to be at this dinner party. It was just for like 8 couples.
Yeah.
And a British friend of mine, we were driving down to the party, and he said, you like baseball? I said, yeah, I love baseball.
Were you a Dodger guy?
Pardon me?
Were you a Dodger or a Yankee fan? Or?
I was a Yankee fan.
Okay, so...
But still, Koufax is Koufax.
Yeah.
And he said to me, well, because there's going to be a professional baseball player there. He says, he's British, he wasn't into baseball. I said, oh, really? Who's that? He says, well, there's Sandy now. I said, no, you got to be kidding. You can't be. And we spent a great, really pleasant evening. And the great thing was that we just talked about other things, not baseball, not music, and it was a great conversation. He's a wonderful guy.
Yeah.
And at the end of the evening, I just said, listen, I have to finally come out and say, I can't wait to tell my friends that I met you. And he said, what, I can't wait to tell my friends I met you, which is the nicest thing I ever heard, I think.
Well, what started the notion of putting a book together? Was it just the idea that you not only had really good stories, did you see a need for it out there? Because I look back on all these interactions you've had, and it makes sense to write a book about it, but I wonder what kind of kicked off the notion of this, and then on top of that, what's it been like to reopen some of those emotional chapters?
There's a couple of things. I was an English major in college, before I left to become a rock and roll musician, and the other thing is that I've always been interested in history, and I think that anybody, and as I'm looking back in the past few years, this period in American history and the history of American music has become really a huge thing, and there's so many people that are interested in it. So I decided to put my memories together and put it out there. I think that everybody who's lived through that should put it out there. I think there's got to be like a whole bunch of testaments to that time who are basically witnesses. Should write it down. Not only me, but people I work with.
Has it been really cathartic having this experience of the memoir?
Yeah, it was very cathartic because as you write, you start off with sort of like an empty canvas, but you always can start off, I was born, and but as things develop, as you keep writing, as you're a writer, things come to you.
Yeah.
And things start blossoming and coming to you, and then you Google this date, and then I found a research assistant in Italy who's actually found me, and this guy was amazing. He was like an OCD lunatic. And, I said, I sent him a part of a chapter. I said, the Murray the K show started at 10 a.m. every morning.
Yep.
And he writes me back. He says, no, it's 10:15 every morning. And just, that I needed, somebody like that. Cause
do you see? At least, like I went to school for writing and history, and I've always just had an affinity. I think to do either or, to be a good historian, you have to know how to write. To be a good writer, you have to know history.
That's very good.
Well, with that said, I was wondering what your thoughts are with where we are today, because I see a lot of similarities socially, for good or ill, between 2017 and 67 or 68 and where we're at now.
I think we're at the beginning of something, hopefully, because we have an administration that's anti-people and that lies to the public, and hopefully there'll be a wellspring of hopefully there'll be like the beginnings of some kind of political revolution in this country, because it's really necessary.
Are you optimistic about the future?
Not right now, no.
Do you see a lot of similarities between the late 60s and where we're at? Like, I guess socially, like the police and then minorities and immigration and terrorism. I mean, there's a lot of those things that bubbled up in the 67, 68, 69, 70, and then here we are.
It was really the war.
Yeah, well, of course.
I mean, that was really it.
Social unrest,
And the generation that I grew up with that wound up protesting, we grew up in the 50s when you didn't protest anything. You just believed people.
Beaver Cleaver.
Exactly. And I write in my book, there was a time when we had a bomb scare in our high school, and so they brought us all out into the soccer field and told us to put our heads like this, until one of the smart kids said, "Wait a second, it was an air raid show. It was an air raid." I said, "If this is an air raid, what the hell are we doing out here?"
You can see it. You know exactly where we are.
And then we realized that these people lie to us every now and then, our principals and sometimes our teachers, who would say, our I before E except after C, which was not true.
Yeah.
And then we took that, between that and the war, which was like the total big lie, we were so used to obeying rules and stuff like that. I don't think that these generations, I don't think kids really give a damn that much. These kids grew up with earbuds and MBAs,
Very apathetic.
Very apathetic. And, I think in a lot of ways that they don't give a damn about, like, the healthcare bill, if they can save money, fine. But
what amazes me is...
and I'm talking mainly about middle class kids.
Because
that's what we're talking about when we talk about the 60s.
The things that they're very passionate about, if that energy was directed elsewhere, one wonders what they could actually be doing, like, in terms of social change. I mean, I'm a part of that generation, and a lot of people that are my age don't have a reference of history. They don't know history, or they don't care to know history.
It's incredible. I mean, they don't even know what the Civil War was.
Everything's the same, so nothing's the same. You know what I mean?
But the problem is we have a president who's the same way.
Yeah.
There's no historical, that doesn't read,
What was...